Imagine for a minute someone gave you access to a bank to borrow as much money as you possibly wanted for whatever you wanted, no questions asked. Now, the only catch with all this is that you cannot go bankrupt on the debt. This here, ladies and gentlemen, is exactly what America has taught its youngest generation to do time and time again when it comes to student loans. Now, today I've got an article titled How 1 in 10 Gen Z student loan borrowers now has more than $100,000 in student loans. I'm going to read part of this article and give you guys my opinion on it. Having student loan debt has become the norm for the latest generations of college goers. A recent survey found that 61% of Americans ages 18 to 24 have some amount of student loan debt. Among these students with loan debt, the majority owe less than $30,000, with 36% of borrowers in this age range owing less than $10,000, or 10% owing between $10,000 and $20,000, and 10% owing between $20,000 and $30,000. Now, one reason that Gen Z has higher levels of debt than other generations is that college costs continue to go up. They've increased a significant amount in just the past decade. Between 2009 and 2010, and 2019 and 2020, the total cost of attendance increased by 40% at public four-year schools and 44% at private four-year schools. The average cost of college in the US is now $36,000 per student per year. If you borrow that amount just for 4 years, you're looking at $145,000 of student loans. So it's not too surprising that 10% of Gen Z owes over $100,000. And this is really alarming. Imagine just starting off your young adult life, not too financially literate or anything like that, and all of a sudden you have over $100,000 in student loans that you have to pay back. And this is not a very good way to start off your working life. You know, you're a young person, you're supposed to be buying your first home, your car, having kids and things like that. And all of a sudden, subconsciously or passively almost, you've attached this huge financial ankle weight that is just dragging you down financially. Now, if we break this down into something that's understandable, you know, you have $145,000 in student loans for 10 years or 120 months at a 7% rate, especially with today's high interest rates, you're looking at a monthly payment of almost $1,200, right? So that's say close to $15,000 per year in payments that this individual has to pay back. Which is just very alarming and something that makes it very difficult for a young person to do. Imagine for a second, you're a woman, you're 18 years old, you're going to go to a 4-year school, get your bachelor's degree. This young woman graduates at the age of 22, finds a decent job at the age of 23. Let's say she's making $80,000 per year, and after taxes and everything, she's bringing in $70,000, right? Well, on top of all this, she still has to pay back her student loans. Let's just say $15,000 worth. So now she's not bringing in $70,000 per year. She's bringing in $55,000 per year, which if she wants to buy a home, a car, and have all the necessary things to really start off a mature adult lifestyle, it becomes really, really hard. And she has to do this for 10 years straight, in this example, paying back the loans. So you question like, hey, why are people more depressed? Suicide rates are going up among young people. Really bad things, right? I mean, even birth rates are falling. And it's because of things like this. This woman is going to be, let's say, she starts paying the loans back at the age of 23 or 24. And all of a sudden, her loans are finally paid off at the age of 34 years old. Well, at that point, yes, the financial burden's gone, which allows her to have extra money, possibly to have kids. But at that point, it becomes very difficult, possibly just because of age or she's deep into her career. And all of a sudden, you have a formula that's now created that causes birth rates in America to go down because you have such a high percentage of young adults exiting college with such large amounts of debt. And having that amount of debt really just limits their ability to grow a family or whatever it might be, buy a house, things like that. So it has these unintended consequences. Yes, it's amazing that these people can go to school, become educated, but the unintended consequences are, if they don't get a super great high-paying job out of school, is that their college expense, their interest payments on the debt and things like that, leads them to have a more difficult lifestyle in the future, a more stressful one, and one that makes it very difficult for a financially illiterate person to have. Now, the real source of all this problem at the end of the day is obviously the college debt, right? So, how and why are these young people able to borrow so much money or borrow so much in terms of loans to afford these expensive schools that they're going to? And I actually asked ChatGPT to name the major years, acts, and milestones which made it easier for young students to acquire these loans. And the real issue here can actually be pointed between the 1950s, but primarily the 1960s during the Higher Education Act, which actually, I'll just read it here. It was actually signed into law by President Lyndon B. Johnson, and this act established the guarantee of student loan programs, where the federal government guaranteed loans made by private lenders. So what essentially happened here in the 1960s and early 70s when all this stuff was going on was that the government essentially made it impossible for lenders to have any risk, for example, when giving these students loans. So the idea at the time was great. It was to allow people to go to schools, become educated, and enter the workforce and become a more competitive nation globally, which has certainly played out. I mean, we look at all the technologies and things like that in our nation, and it is fantastic, hands down. I think there's been some really great things that comes out of all this. But today, with nearing, I think it's like $1.8 trillion in student loan debt, it has really had some unintended consequences again, where, hey, these kids are able to take out massive amounts of student loans. These companies are able to lend out the money, knowing eventually they'll be paid back either by the student or by the government bailing them out. So with that in mind, the student takes out the debt, let's just call it $100,000 in debt, and the college sees, that whichever colleges out there see that these kids have the ability to actually take out as much money as they possibly want to be able to afford the school that they want to go to. So it's a feedback loop system of these kids being able to afford the colleges raise prices, and the kids don't care because the kids can continue to take out larger and larger loans. So it's this negative feedback loop of just higher and higher loans, higher and higher tuition costs, which does not help out anybody at the end of the day and really creates a more sick environment, economically speaking. And you really look at all this and you think like, wow, the reason why these kids can't even go bankrupt on the debt is because it's non-tangible. I mean, if you go out and you buy a house, you get a mortgage on the home, even if you go bankrupt and you fail to pay the loan, the bank can always get the house back, right? There's still the land, there's the home, there's something tangible there. Whereas a student loan of, let's say, $100,000 for someone to go get their bachelor's in finance or art or history, writing, English, or whatever it might be, there's nothing tangible there to go bankrupt on. If a student tries to go bankrupt, they can't. One, it's not allowed. And two, there's nothing to give back to the institution. You can't give back your bachelor's degree. It's non-tangible. You can't touch it. It doesn't exist. It's a contract. It's a paper, something like that. But essentially, it has created a weird paradigm where you just have this weird trifecta where between the loan issuers, the students, and the government, it's created this crazy difficult, I almost want to call it like a scheme to get out of, that's really bad for the nation as a whole. And you think about this more and more, and it just becomes like, how the heck do we get out of this? And I don't know the right solution. At the end of the day, look, right here on the screen is the problem. In 1965, when we allowed to have pretty much infinite amount of debt to be issued to these young kids, these young adults, that is the problem right there. We cannot have this socialist, I hate to use that word, but the socialist program almost, which allows anyone who can get into school to be able to afford whatever price that school's willing to price out their education at. So there's nothing competitive in this. It's these schools realize that the value of their bachelor's degree is enough for these kids to take out this massive amount of debt. And if we were to repeal these terrible acts, which had good intentions at the time, if we were to repeal them, take them out of the system, throw them in the trash, it would create a much more competitive environment between the schools, driving down the price and driving up the quality, where today we have quality of schooling going down and the price going up simultaneously. And again, there's so many people graduating and getting their degrees nowadays, it almost erases the value. It's basic supply and demand. When you have every single year, 1 or 2 million students graduating these colleges. It just floods the marketplace with these kids with their associates or bachelors and masters and everything like that, which erases the value like anything. The more you have of something, the less the value goes down. And that's why nowadays we see trade schools and blue collar jobs really rising in popularity, job security, and higher wages ultimately. But I think that this problem is really solvable. All you have to do is get rid of the ability to have unlimited funds being given to these kids in the form of debt. And that would really erase the problem here. It would create a much more competitive landscape from the colleges. And yes, it would hurt short term for the colleges. It would make it more difficult for some people to get into schools, but it would erase the huge burden of all this debt on these young adults, which is very unhealthy. And just creates a lot of unproductivity at the end of the day. Too much, it's become too easy for these kids to just get money, and too many of them are financially illiterate. This whole country runs on debt, and that needs to be solved. But unfortunately, you guys, I don't think it will be solved anytime soon. This problem will probably only get worse over time as long as these acts and this mindset stays in place. Anyways, you guys, thank you all so much for watching. Be sure to like, comment, share, and subscribe if you haven't already, and I'll see you guys on the next video. Thank you and goodbye.